Welcome to the DMF. I'm Justin Younts. This is part three. Okay, so tell me, which came first, a love for comedy or a love for film?
So first, it would have been a love for comedy.
Mm,
I've done live comedy for the past 10 years now or so. I started out, I think how it all started was when I was in high school, I would listen to Pete Holmes's podcast, and he would
mm,
have all these comedians on. And in high school, I think a huge escape for me was watching comedy specials. Like I think that was kind of the height of the comedy special being really high quality.
mm.
And all these amazing comedians were being put on streaming services, and so that was a huge escape for me, was being able to watch an hour of John Mulaney telling jokes when things were not super easy for me in high school. And so um I got really into listening to Pete Holmes's podcast. That was a huge escape for me. And the thing that I noticed over and over, because I had been thinking about how do you become a stand-up comedian? What's the career trajectory for that? And over, they would talk about how they joined these improv groups in college. And so when I was at Florida State, going into my second year, I had really not found a group of people that I felt like I connected with at all. And I searched up like improv Florida State, and I found this group called No Bears Allowed, which was our on campus, our college improv group. And um, and so I found No Bears Allowed, and I was lucky because when I came into their group, we had just had a bunch of seniors go to Chicago to Improv Olympics and taken
Mm,
intensives at IO. And so when they came back, they really structured, like we had our performance team, and then we had our like level two team, and then we had our, Saturday drop-ins, and it was very much structured similarly to how an improv business is run.
mm,
And at the same time, they also had just come off of these intensives, and they had so much valuable knowledge about how you make improv good. One of the first people that was a huge mentor to me, her name was Sophia Ombra, and she was the first person that ever said the phrase "play with love" to me. And
mm.
I did improv in college. I did UCB out in LA, and then I did the front porch here.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've seen a lot of different iterations of improv theaters. I took an intensive at the Annoyance, and I've seen a lot of different philosophies on how to do good improv. But you know, I think what I always come back to, what makes the most compelling scenes, is that play with love principle, in the sense of, and like, not like even in like a ooey gooey way. It's
Yeah.
more like people are interested when you're interested. And so when someone walks into a scene and they're like, "Oh, I'm just like buttering this sandwich," if you as their scene partner make that sandwich so important, people add in all this context from their lives and they project onto the scene and that kind of thing. And so much of like the experience of humanity is in these tiny little mundane things that we do on a day to day. In many ways, like the way that you make your sandwich is some of the most interesting
Mm,
behaviors that you do, because you have your little ritual that comes from your human experience.
yeah.
And so I was really introduced to that philosophy by Sophia. And I
Mm.
remember I walked into my first little drop in workshop and I was so nervous. And she came right up to me and she was like, "I've never seen you around here before. What's your name?" And she was so friendly and so warm.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went out to LA, where it's a little bit of a different culture. I mean, everyone's just like jaded at that point, like doing comedy all the time. And, you kind of lose some of that warm effervescence.
Yeah.
Um, And then when I came back to Savannah and came to the front porch, a huge piece of their business model is making the audience feel valued and loved and respected. Like the
Right.
moment you walk into their front doors, the bartenders are waving at you.
Right.
They're offering you free drinks. If it's your birthday, they all know it's your birthday. You know, and I've done like over 10,000 hours of like hosting and live comedy at this point, and I've noticed over and over whenever I'm doing a hosting gig and I'm just chatting with the people at the private party beforehand or something like that, everyone is so terrified of comedians. Like, I'll be just chatting with a girl at a corporate gig and asking, "Oh, like, what do you like about doing social media?" And always, without fail, they're like, "Don't make this part of your set. Don't make this like a bit. Don't. Okay, if I tell you this, please don't like make fun of me for it." And people are so afraid of comedians making fun of them, especially like in crowd work. I think from
Yeah.
like 90s and 2000s comedians doing this crowd work that is like punching down and just like criticizing the audience member that came to your show and paid money and
Yeah.
filled a seat for you. And what I loved about watching John and Bree host at the front porch is when they do crowd work, it's like the audience member is always in on the joke with them. They're never making
Yeah.
a joke at the audience member's expense. It's like they're
Yeah.
together enjoying and valuing each other's company. And it just makes the experience for the audience so much better. And people want to come back and they want to write you these great reviews because you made them feel special and warm and you made them feel like there's a community. Um, so I did comedy in all those different respects for about 10 years up till now, and I still do the Savannah for Morons tour now and host around town and stuff. But 2 years ago, I got into filmmaking, and it was really born out of I was producing a lot of live comedy shows. I produced this show with my friend Deshawn called Mom, Can You Come Pick Me Up? And we had two live shows that we did, and I produced those. And some of the people at the theater that were involved in film saw the way that I produced, and I think they were like, "Oh, she could be a filmmaker because she has that attention to detail." So I was really lucky because I had friends that kind of took me aside and said, "Do you want to be a filmmaker? Do you want to be a director?" And I at at the point that one of my friends asked me, "Do you want to be a director?" I had never thought about that word before in my entire life because it felt so far. I was pursuing stand-up comedy, and
Yeah.
somehow being a director felt way out of the realm of possibilities. Um, and but as soon as someone asked me directly, "Do you want to be a director?" It's like it all came together for me. Like every experience I had had leading up to that point, everything I had been good at naturally. I love teaching myself software and um, whenever I was sad and lonely in LA, the first thing I would do is take myself to a movie and go see a movie by myself. That's like one of my favorite ways to self-soothe. And so it was like, the lens came into focus and I was like, I finally, from all this confidence I had from doing comedy, was able to say, yeah, I think I do, but I don't even know where to start. And I was really lucky. I found this like group of guys that all did production that brought me on, and I would co-direct with them or I would production design for them. And like production design is the best way to be on a set teaching yourself how to direct because you're always in the room where the scene is happening. You're not necessarily busy in the way that you're not busy during the take necessarily, unless you're doing some real janky PD, which that also happens too. Um, but unless you're pulling fishing line or something, but I was lucky because this group of guys basically that were doing their own production comedy sketch thing they would invite me onto their sets and I could just observe. And I was helping them out with PD, but I was mostly just being a sponge to how a film set was run. And the two guys that I feel like I owe my entire filmmaking career to are Trevor Hardin and Eddie Tucker, who they run a production studio called Hardin Creative in Bluffton. And they were fans of the improv theater, The Front Porch, and I had co-written a script called Bottom Shelf Wine Connoisseurs, and we sent it to Trevor Hardin, and Trevor said he was on board to help us produce it. Eddie Tucker DP'd it, and they for free provided me with all of this gear that I never should have been able to touch as a first time director. I got to shoot my
Wow.
directorial debut on a red camera, on a red Gemini. Nobody gets that.
Wow.
And not even just the red Gemini. Eddie Tucker is one of the most talented DPs I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some really talented DPs, but he is one of those guys that just lights in a way that is so cinematic and so expensive and luxurious looking. And that was really the vision that I had for this comedy film, is because I felt like the sketch comedy that I grew up on, it's never like beautiful to watch. Like it's
Yeah.
funny, but they don't really think about making it beautiful for the audience too. And
Mhm.
I never would have been able to achieve such like a beautiful, luxurious look without Eddie DPing that. And they were so patient with me. Like I didn't know anything about filmmaking at this point. I
Wow.
didn't know what a dolly in was at this point.
Ha!
And I
Oh,
was
wow.
shot and I was shooting on a
Like,
red.
like I just needed. Can you take that train tracks thing and put that, like, move it and
Well,
then they dolly in?
what I told him? He Eddie looked at me. I think about this literally every day. This like keeps me up at night. Um, Eddie, when we did our location scout meeting, he looked at me and he said, "Are we shooting this all handheld?" And I said, "Yeah, all handheld," confidently. And thank God this man was in the military, so like he is one of the most ripped strong men that I've ever worked with, so
Yeah.
thank God for him. But I didn't even know that you could use a tripod for some of the shots we were doing. Like I just I
So wait, so you
can't.
actually did everything handheld?
He did that entire short film handheld. I think about it all the time because again, this is like such a professional DP
Man,
that I got to
you're
work with.
mean. You're
And
mean.
I put him through it, and I would never do that to a DP now. I like
Yeah, do
one
every
day
the whole movie's handheld.
like when I make it, the first person that I need to send like a gift basket to is Eddie Tucker, because that man did so much
Yeah.
for me. I do wish that maybe one of the people in the room had stepped in and been like, "Hey, we don't actually have to do this
Yeah, we
handheld,"
don't have to do.
but that's okay.
We have the tripod. We also have the steady. We have the steady cam. We can, do a couple of
They
things
have
here.
so much. Um, so
Wow, man, you're mean.
that
He must
literally,
hate you.
up that
No, I'm
night,
kidding.
man. But the thing about it is that Trevor and Eddie were so experienced, and
Yeah,
they were so willing to work with someone like me who had no experience. I'm completely self-taught because of people like that who
yeah,
were just patient with me and allowed me to make mistakes. And directing is learn self-teaching directing is terrifying because the only way to do it is to fail miserably in front of a crew of 30 people over and over
yeah,
and over. Like I
yeah.
it is you have to not even have
I'm
a
surprised you didn't.
capacity.
Since you didn't know anything, you didn't go. Oh, so I'm gonna hold the camera, right?
Well, the other thing is I did not realize the scale of the gear because you can
Yeah,
imagine they told me, "Hey, we're gonna bring the red camera and we're gonna bring these
yeah,
lighting
that's
rigs
pretty
and stuff,"
great,
and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, great, great, great." And
man.
I I
Most people
fully
get like a cannon.
I I fully expected like a cannon on like a handheld gimbal. That's what I was
No,
picturing.
no,
And then
it's
when we get there
huge.
the day of, when we get to the location the day of, and the camera team starts unloading all the gear from the truck, I had to, because the whole piece of this was me just like faking it till I made it. So I had to
Yeah.
act like I expected all of this gear to be there.
Yes, of course.
And
This gear.
of
Put that over there. That's a
yeah,
C
they're like, where
stand.
do you want to set up Video Village? And I'm like, oh, right here, sir. What
Yeah, put
Video
set it
Village? Yeah.
right here. Don't you want it like closer to the set? No, this is perfect. This is
Yeah,
another
yeah,
restaurant.
yeah. So that was my first time directing, and
Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.